I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome to Comedians I Love Part 2. Take that again. Welcome to Comedians I Love Part 2. Hopefully you'll like and be familiar with who I talk about in today's video. This is part of the I Love series. I just want to share stuff that I love with you guys so that you know and can relate. Freaking making me bend down all that. Today's video is sponsored by... Well, I'm going to talk about the Three Stooges today. So, the Three Stooges, dude. There was always three of them. They rotated out brothers at times. Moe, Larry, and Shemp, or Moe, Larry, and Curly. And then they had Curly Joe and some other dude, too. Not even going to talk about them. That's still a sore spot. They started out with Shemp, and then in the later years came back with Shemp after Curly, my personal favorite, got really sick. If I'm not mistaken... he had a couple strokes and died early, like 41. Their physicality was so in sync and precise. Similar to Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, they found another pocket of how to be physically funny without the magic or the death-defying stunts, like I talk about in my first Comedians I Love part. They just smacked each other around. That was their shtick. They spanned decades creating content in all forms. Short story to TV to cartoon. But their disputes and arguments on screen fully displayed sibling relationships. I remember hitting my brothers the same way Moe hit his two brothers. They were highly influential on me. Probably too much so. Curly was my personal favorite. He was a whack job. Love him. His reactions to getting hit, sometimes he would get a good one in, and if you're not familiar with the Three Stooges, you gotta look them up. Let me take my last two CBD gummies that I have, because I can drop my link in the description, and you can scroll all the way down, enter the code, get 10% off. A little bit after the Three Stooges, but still kind of around that time, a beginning singer. And across the sea to Ireland. Met up with a spastic child of a man.
Talk about the Scotland.
Dean and Jerry are very different. It was the perfect goofball, straight man combo. One's a smooth-talking love song of a guy, and the other wasn't quite that. Let's talk specifically about Jerry Lewis, because that dude is my heart, man. He was probably the first comedian that I actually ever got into. I remember being given Cinderfella and The Nutty Professor at probably 8 or 9 years old. And I thought, who is this guy? I adored these movies. So much so that I scoured YouTube looking for every piece of footage that I could of Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis was active in the entertainment industry. I mean, he died at 91 in 2017. And he was active since the 40s. He may have retired in there, but I really don't think he did. He was doing stuff up until he passed. And maybe fact check me on this, but I think he directed around 60 movies and starred in them. This dude flopped and flailed on the ground. He made the most extreme faces. He could sing, kinda dance. His trademark was his high-pitched voice. Hey Dean! Something like that. He was younger than Dean, less popular with the women, although he did well in that department, I'm sure. Jerry Lewis was seen as a child, even after the 10 years that he was with Dean. Other avenues started to attract Dean. He was a singer. He wanted to practice serious acting roles, create studio albums, TV shows, and comedy roasts. In the 50s is when they split, 55 or 56. Jerry totally solidified himself as the goofball, wacko, nutjob, spitfire. Oh. Wildly inspired by Chaplin and Keaton, and others of the silent film era too. You can see it all over his act. Dean joined the Rat Pack, which consisted mostly of actors and singers. It was a much more serious, dramatic career for them. And I love the differences between the two career paths. Jerry Lewis stays with comedy and does stray in his later years. He did a movie with Johnny Depp, The King of Comedy. If you haven't seen that, dude, Jerry Lewis can act. He does so alongside Robert De Niro, under the direction of Martin Scorsese. See? And Jerry went on to influence American audiences and especially comedians up until the, 2020s, up until now. Dean, on the other hand, stays with music and acting. He maintains a suave, drink-sipping, mellow vibing, that's a Morayan lifestyle. Are we clear? Okay. I personally sided with Jerry Lewis out of the two. I'm sad they broke up, but Jerry Lewis needed to explode for what he was, as did Dean. And that might not have happened had they stayed together after those 10 years. They would have been holding one another back. So they broke up. And they didn't speak for 20 years. Until one day, a Mr. Frank Sinatra of the Rat Pack decided it's been too long.
I have a friend who loves what you do every year and who just wanted to come out and say, would you send my friend out, please? Would you send him out here? Come here.
One of the greatest moments ever captured on TV is that right there. Oh, and I read their book. Their book is so good. Because it's one of the only books that's ever made me cry. I love Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. Anyway, I could go on and on about those two. Do your own research and come to love them yourself, or maybe you already do. Drop some comments if that's the case. Maybe a like, maybe a share. But that's me. In that link that I mentioned, you can buy one of these. I don't mean to be so forward. Just saying. Abbott and Costello. Their comedy was so funny, dude. And not physically. They were the equivalent of the Three Stooges, but they were verbal.
Oh, the guy on first base.
Who is on first?
Well, what are you asking me for?
I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, who is on first?
I'm asking you who's on first.
Right, so that's not physical. They didn't slap each other around, except they did so with words. They played with language. Linguistically. Who's on first? Volts versus watts. Their movies were chock full of these types of bits.
What makes you so dumb?
Oh, it just comes to me naturally.
Sure. Suppose you walk into a baseball field. What teams are playing?
I don't know.
Then what are you doing in that baseball field?
I don't know. You got me in here, now get me out.
They inspired an entirely new line of comedians who may specialize in witty banter over physical comedy and wordplay and puns. Although Abbott and Costello exceeded puns by light years, they never missed a beat, and their dialogue and arguments were delivered at a rapid-fire rate.
Now I throw the ball to first base, whoever it is drops the ball, so the guy runs to second. Who picks up the ball and throws it to what? What throws it to I don't know. I don't know, throws it back to tomorrow. A triple play.
I will always have such love for Abbott and Costello. They ended up breaking up, and then a few years later, Costello died. Unfortunately, he was young too, but they were so good. Really quick, I gotta mention Red Skelton. Similar to Jerry Lewis and kind of around the same time too. I can imagine the two were in competition with one another. They played multiple characters in their movies. Whole different wardrobe, makeup even, unique character traits, voices. Red Skelton was an artist. He painted and he made jewelry, which is a hard word for me to say, so be excited that I got it on the first try. For Red Skelton, his comedy was his face. He was definitely very physical too, but his face was the biggest asset, without a doubt. Okay, really quick before I end. I gotta talk about Lucille Ball and Carol Burnett. You can't mention Lucille Ball without mentioning Carol Burnett. Sometimes they brought new comedy to the small screens, or to the big screens in movies too. I love Lucy. The Lucy Show, the Carol Burnett Show, all smash hits. Mi favorititos. With Lucille, you got Vitamina Vegemin. You obviously got the chocolate in the face. You got the iconic voice. You got the iconic look. Carol Burnett too. And still kicking. At 84 or 85. I've lost track. All of these comedians kind of intermix in each other's movies and shows. You'll see a lot of the same appearances that were on comedy roasts all together. And they helped introduce a lot of other comedians to me that I will be talking about in future episodes. So please stay tuned to my I Love series, specifically my Comedians I Love series. Find it here on this end card while I do some serenading physically. Boop. Oh, hey, don't fall.